Hi everyone and welcome back. My recent review on rare Japanese clays was surprisingly popular, so I decided to go back to Amazon Japan and see if they have any more. I actually found so many new products that I have to split them into separate videos. So today we're going to be taking a look at this colorful corn clay, a shiny silicone clay, and this giant box of scented soap clay. This one came up as a recommendation next to a face mask printing machine, and I'm impressed how Japan simply incorporated the pandemic into their crafting industry. So let's get started with the soap clay, and there are plenty of ideas for things you can make on the box. This little green guy is a bit creepy, but these pastel-looking Pikachus are very cute. When I ordered this, I assumed it would just contain small packs of finished clay, but I only realized now that this is actually a DIY kit for making your own. This is very different to a Korean soap clay that I filmed many years ago, so I'm even more excited to try it out. You get a lot of extra equipment with this kit, and the quality is amazing. I mentioned this in another video, but Japanese craft kits use a different type of plastic that's harder and more durable than toy kits from other countries. So a lot of the stuff you get in here can be kept and reused for a very long time. The kit comes with these little packets of what feels like soap powder. The amount is quite generous and you get 2 of every color. This reminds me a lot of the Nerikeshi putty kit from my last video, which I completely messed up because I added too much water. So learning from that mistake, I'm going to translate the instructions before I start. The Google Translate app isn't perfect, but it's definitely enough to give you a basic idea of each step. It says that you should use exactly 2.5 milliliters of water and be careful not to add more. I love how this kit even comes with a mixing pot, which is the perfect size for the powder. I'm measuring 2.5 milliliters with a pipette and adding this to the bowl. Then I'm mixing everything together. This feels very dry at first, but it does form a crumbly dough after a while. It's almost like making pastry where you don't think there's enough moisture, but somehow everything comes together in the end. So this is what the finished clay looks like, and it has a flowery but not unpleasant scent. I'm usually not a fan of craft supplies with any type of smell, but they obviously added the fragrance here to make it more soap-like, and that actually works quite well. The texture is quite grainy, and it reminds me a lot of the baking soda clay from this video. But unlike the baking soda clay, this one has a sticky surface and it also leaves a bit of residue on your fingers. I'm quickly mixing up another pack of green clay, and I'm going to use both of these to make a peach. Start by making a Hershey's Kiss shape by placing it on the table and pressing the top together with your fingers. Then use a tool to cut a groove on one side, and yes, I'm fully aware that this looks like a butt. Now make a tiny leaf using green and stick this onto the base with water. Just like the first video, I'm going to use needle felting eyes here, which look great and they save you a bit of work. This clay has really similar properties to baking soda clay, so I suspect it's actually the same basic recipe. I think they might have added some more adhesive to make it come together without heating, and that also explains why it's stickier than the original version. Next up we have corn clay. I love this corn mascot, and these cute little fruits were the inspiration behind the pieces I made for this video. I did a quick translation of the packaging and it looks fairly uncomplicated. This is the cheapest out of all 3 clays, and it only costs around $4. So I'm quite impressed by the attention to detail, like this resealable opening on the bag. The portion size isn't big, but I think it's quite fair considering how cheap it is. And you get all 3 primary colors to mix into other shades. The texture reminds me very strongly of the rice clay from the previous video. It's very easy to sculpt and holds detail well. It also passes the flower petal test perfectly. The edges are paper thin, and it even picked up the texture from my skin, which gives added realism when making clay flowers. If you want to know more about this technique, then please watch my flower crown tutorial here. I'm mixing some yellow into the blue to make a green shade for the pear. Then I'm making a small piece of brown for the stem. I like how this clay is deliberately slightly less saturated, so the colors come out very nicely instead of being super bright. I also find it much easier to stick pieces together compared to the rice clay from the other video. My theory for this one is that it's just a regular cold porcelain clay. It's called corn clay because it's obviously made from cornstarch. In my experience, the quality of cold porcelain can differ a lot, but you only see this after the clay has dried. So I'm curious to see what happens after I leave this for a few days. Last but not least is silicone clay. This is from a Japanese company called Edison, and they make a lot of cool DIY craft kits and toys. The selling point of this clay is that it stays soft all the time, but it also comes with instructions to bake it if you want to harden your pieces. However, this is definitely not a polymer clay because the baking time and temperatures are very different. Based on this small box, I was just expecting it to contain pieces of clay, but I was really amazed to see that it actually comes with a ton of other stuff. First, there's a heat-proof mat for baking your pieces. Then you have 2 high-quality clay tools that can be used for all kinds of professional designs as well. Next comes this squishy silicone thing, which I'm not really sure about, but it might be a mixing bowl. Then you have a roller and some cookie cutters. These are sharper and higher quality than the cutters you get from Play-Doh or other dollar store toy kits. I'm pretty sure you can use these for making real cookies or bento boxes as well. And of course, you get these 6 colors of silicone clay. I love the packaging design with the logo printed onto each one. This is the baking set, which means all the colors are designed for creating bakery products. The instructions give you a lot of inspiration for things you can make. And I realized that this pink thing is a cake base, which is pretty amazing. I've never seen this anywhere else, and you can have fun decorating a cake without using up too much material. Since I have a fruit theme in this video, I'm going to make an orange. First, I need some yellow clay, and this literally looks like sliced cheese. It pulls apart quite easily and has no smell at all. But for some reason, the more I start kneading it, the harder the clay becomes. It reminds me of a nearly cured version of the silicone putty I use for making molds, and it basically crumbles when you try to pull it apart. This texture is not satisfying at all. Now I'm taking a small piece of the red to add some color and seeing how well the 2 shades blend together. This was a big mistake because I used too much of it, and the red is so pigmented that it starts to dominate everything. It feels exactly like trying to squish a Babybel cheese together, both in texture and color. In the end, I didn't end up with an orange, but a light pinkish color. So I decided to change plans and make an apple instead. I'm using a tiny bit of green and pressing it into the top. This clay is really odd because the final result looks beautiful with a glossy surface that's quite soft if you press on it. But if you're trying to work with a larger piece, then it suddenly becomes very stubborn and difficult to use. I think silicone clay works best for very small pieces, and it also explains why it comes packaged in thin slices. So here are all 3 fruits, and I'm going to leave them to dry. This is 2 days later, and the peach has hardened quite a bit. Once again, this reminds me a lot of the baking soda clay because the outside has the same matte grainy texture. I'm going to test this out by running it under water. At first nothing happens, but if you rub it long enough, then it does start to turn bubbly like soap. It also smells very nice, so on the whole, this kit really delivers what it promises. Next comes the corn clay, and the dried areas have turned lighter in color. However, there are also several cracks, which is not a good sign. Many years ago, I tried a cheap cold porcelain clay from a French brand, and the same thing happened. So unfortunately, this one isn't suitable for serious crafting. It's worth mentioning that homemade cold porcelain clay didn't crack, so if you want the recipe for that, then please check out the video link below. And lastly, the silicone apple got a bit squashed in the box, but it also seems to spread out slightly after a while. It's just as soft as the first day, so this clay really doesn't dry out. To complete this video, I'm going to bake it just to see what happens. A quick translation of the instructions says that you have to set the oven to 200 degrees Celsius or 400 Fahrenheit and bake it for 10 to 15 minutes. This is very different to polymer clay, which I found quite interesting. I'm using my usual equipment for baking polymer clay, which you can see here. However, I only realized after taking it out that the silicone was firmly stuck to the baking sheet. The clay has obviously fused together with the silicone from the baking sheet, and this problem never even crossed my mind. It also explains why the kit gives you a special mat for baking the clay, and I thought this was just unusually generous of them. I tried separating the paper, but it was pretty hopeless, so I'm just ripping off as much as I can. The apple, however, has hardened perfectly and it has the same glossy shine. It's very hard to pick a favorite here, but I really like the Edison silicone clay. Mostly because it's unlike anything I've seen before, and it's basically a combination of silicone putty and polymer clay. I also love the final surface, which looks like it's been glazed. If you want to try any of these out, then just check the links below, and please read my tips for ordering from Amazon Japan. I'm Joanna, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!